How do you manage challenges? How do you react when you're faced with trouble? The truth is that everyone faces challenges, and the only difference is how we react to the challenges, is how we manage them, and how prepared we are to face them. Because even that level you were praying for, that blessing you were praying for, it's coming with its own troubles. And if you're not ready to steward the blessing that the Lord has given you, it will quickly vanish from your presence and you will lose it. So you have to be prepared, just like how the children of Israel used to be slaves in Egypt, and they had never fought before. They were not part of the army, but when they were going into the promised land, crossing the Red Sea, they got into the wilderness, the Lord started to prepare them as an army. And by the time they got into the promised land, they were fighting. They had to fight. But they had never been fighters before. But because they were getting into their blessing, their promised land, they had to learn to fight. Now I'm going to remind you again. You see, when we face trouble, that's the time we get defeated. That's the time we feel bad. And those times where you feel helpless is the time where you have to literally gather all your courage and start fighting, because the enemy is always fighting. They don't sleep. The enemy doesn't sleep. He has no sleep. He doesn't have the luxury to sleep. The Lord only gives sleep to his beloved. Okay? But you have to sleep and wake up and be ready to fight. I've been reading the book of Samuel. I'm still in the Old Testament. I'm now in 1 Samuel, and the story of Hannah and Peninnah and their husband Elkanah is very interesting. That is for the birth of Samuel, prophet Samuel. And for the longest time, Peninnah used to make fun and provoke Hannah because she did not have kids. And the thing is that Hannah was loved by her husband. Do you know that that's the same thing that happened to Rachel, the wife of Jacob? Okay, she had no kids. Okay, and she longed to have kids, but the Lord had closed her womb. But she was loved. Who doesn't want to be loved? That's what we want, because even the Lord ordered husbands to love their wives. So the most loved wife, Hannah, did not have kids, and she longed to have kids. And Peninnah, her rival, used to provoke her. And every time they went to Shiloh, I'm just summarizing what's in the story, to pray, they went in the presence of God, where she could literally fight for herself and talk to the Lord about her issue, because every time, obviously, she talked to her husband would ask her here. So her husband would ask her, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downcast? This is 1 Samuel 1:8. Her husband would say to her, why are you crying? Why are you weeping? Obviously, the husband could only love her. He would give her double portion, like the love was obvious. But he didn't have he was not the one that had closed her womb. It was because children come from God. But then one time, like I told you, your response to your problems is what is going to determine how your problems will either continue. Okay, I was still recording and a call came through and I had to cut it. But we are here still in 1 Samuel, talking about the story of Hannah and Peninnah, and how she came about, and how she solved her problem of being childless. So she used to cry because her rival Peninnah used to provoke her. So one time when they were in Shiloh, she was crying because she did that every single time. So this time her husband Elkanah told her, I'm reading now 1 Samuel, this is 1 Samuel 8. So her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Do I not mean more to you than 10 sons? Okay, so when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Annie, Eli, the priest, was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. So I'm going to stop there, but this is amazing because all that while she would not even have the courage to pray. She would just weep and cry and be sad. That is the way she had always handled her trouble, her problems. She would be crying and be sad and literally be depressed, downhearted. Okay? But this time, after eating and drinking, because her husband would ask her, why are you not eating? She would not even eat. Those are signs of depression. But this time, she stood up after eating and drinking, even though she was still in trouble, being provoked by her rival Penina. This time, she stood up and went, and instead of crying by herself, she went and started talking to the Lord. She was praying, and as the priest of the Lord, Eli, saw her, he was even amazed because words were not coming out of her mouth. She was just talking to the Lord in her heart, okay? And the priest told her, may the Lord answer your prayer. And that's the time she got an answer. So I asked you in the beginning, how do you handle problems when problems come to you? How do you manage? How do you react when you get problems? We see here, Hannah was deeply troubled. She was not even eating. She was stressed. She was in distress. I know there are times in our lives where you feel so discouraged, where you feel so bad, where things are not working out for you, but how do you react? Do you start complaining like the children of Israel, how they used to complain in the wilderness? They were not used to such life, because in Egypt, because the desert is a weird place, it's scary, it's lifeless. I don't blame them, they used to complain, but we learn from what the Lord has written for us in the Bible, okay? We learn from that, all right? So how you react is the difference between how your problem will continue to manifest. Because if Hannah had continued not to eat and not to talk to the Lord, I think her problem would have been prolonged. But this time, she broke the pattern. She told herself, no, let me go talk to the Lord. Let me go pray to the Lord. And she made a vow to the Lord. Lord, if you give me a child, a son, I'm going to dedicate him to you. He's going to serve you he's going to be a Nazarite. For the rest of his life, he's just going to be serving the Lord. And the Lord granted her prayer. I feel like that is also one way of praying. Like you deeply pray to the Lord and cry to him instead of crying to yourself and crying to people, because she was crying to her husband and she made a promise, a vow to the Lord. Lord, if you give me this, let's say, for example, you want something. Maybe you want a car. Lord, if you give me a car, when I go to church, I'll make sure I give a lift to someone. There are people that have been giving me lifts to church, to and fro, and I literally pray in my heart, and I'm like, Lord, may they always have a car because they're using it for a good cause. Do you know what I'm saying? I think it must have been, on Saturday. Today is Monday. I'm recording this video on 13th April. It was literally on Saturday, that was, I think, 11th? Must have been, Saturday was 11th, probably, yes, April 2026. And as I was driving, this person that is, people that are doing their own things came and literally knocked me. They scratched the car on the side, and they were passing on the wrong side of the road. It was traffic jam, and I was so stressed out, and I was so depressed, and I'm like, oh my God, this cost, how am I going to do this? I went back home. I was so sad, and I sat down in my room, and I was like, oh my goodness, how do I do this? And in that moment, I first kept quiet. I collected my thoughts, and I could hear the Holy Spirit tell me, do not say anything negative. Because it's been my pattern for the last many years. Every time when I'm in trouble, I use my mouth to speak a lot of negativity. But this time the Lord told me, no, You're not speaking anything negative. And that's when I stood up and told myself, no, devil, you're not taking my joy. I started declaring, and I'm like, no, you're not doing anything. And I started praying, and I'm like, Lord, anytime I'm driving on the Lord, even when I'm not driving, I will be safe. This time I reacted different because the Lord convicted me. I would have been sad. That car still has a scratch, a big scratch. But I told myself, devil, you're not stealing my joy. Maybe that happened, but it will never happen again. No one will ever scratch the car I'm driving or I'm seated in. And that's how I regained my strength from the depression, from the thoughts, where am I going to get the money for the mechanic? And I was like, the Lord is going to provide, and I will always be safe in any means of transport. I reacted different, but before I would react so bad. And I was thinking about my life in the past, how I would never get in trouble for one thing, maybe something is not working out, and I would talk myself and go into a rabbit hole of talking bad, and I call it trash talk negative things. Oh my God, I can't believe this, or life is happening that. And I would be talking and confessing. I would be confessing bad, annoying things, and I would be so negative. And it's ridiculous when I think about it. But in that moment, when you're stressed out, cry unto the Lord. And then don't confess anything negative, because the Lord is going to make those things you're saying out. Whatever you say is going to be confirmed. Your words are prayer. Your words are powerful. We are created in the image of the Lord who created the heavens and the earth by speaking them into life. So what you're saying, whether you're joking, I did a video about how our words shape our destiny. I'm going to link it somewhere in the cards, okay? But those words especially, when you're in anguish, like your spirit and your soul and everything, you mean everything you say. That's why when people are angry at you, pay attention to what they're saying, because they mean it. They're not joking about it, okay? And this, now that's an example in the Bible, I'm now going to give you an example in my everyday life. I have a friend called Grace, and she's been my friend for a long time because we went to the same high school, okay? And when I first met her, I was not yet a Christian, but she was, and she always fascinated me. Her ways fascinated me. She was kind. She's still kind. She would give us, me and our other friends, she would give us her clothes. She would be so welcoming, give us lifts and all that. But I was amazed. I looked at how her life was, even though there was trouble, because everyone gets problems, everyone gets challenges at work, everywhere. And she would always be cool, calm, and connected. One time I asked her, why? Why is it like that? And she told me that she lives by faith. You know that faith, in fact, one time she told me she has so much faith that her faith is like the faith of the people we read about in the Bible. Because sometimes she has told me stories of how things like how she did her wedding was able to be done successfully, and how the money came about because of her faith. She had prayed and believed, and how the story of how she bought her house, it was by faith. Not because they had so much money, her and her husband, and how she's able to be married. She gets challenges, but the way she navigates those challenges, when I think about it now that I'm a believer, I'm like, oh, actually everyone gets problems, but how you react to them is the difference. For her, she would be troubled. Me, I would be rushing to tell the world and to tell her how life is difficult, how my job is difficult. But for her, she would take those conversations to the Lord. You see, like how Hannah, this time she didn't complain to her husband. This time she probably didn't talk back to Penina. She went and talked to the Lord, and the Lord comforted her. And from that time, she went back home. Okay. She would be talking to the Lord instead of complaining, instead of saying negative things. Me, I would literally go off in the past and talk to the world and tell them my problems. But everything you tell people, they're keeping it then in their heads and they're helping in the manifestation of those things. So as you look at your life, I don't know what is happening. I don't know what is going on. Please, don't let it become worse than it already is. I know it may be difficult. Sometimes you can't even pray. First, sit down and relax. The first thing you should do when you're in trouble, don't use your mouth to confess anything negative. Use the little strength remaining to confess good things. No matter, I know it's easier said than done, but do not make your situation worse by confessing anything negative. Please, I beg you, because I've seen it. Don't, every time you get in trouble, don't use your mouth to make it worse by complaining, by uttering out negativity. Don't do it. You'd rather be quiet, even in your heart, in your thoughts. Think positive. Try. You could come on YouTube and just listen to positive, whatever. Just think about what will make you positive. Don't confess anything, because the enemy is ready to take those words and use them against you. He's the accuser of brethren. And the other thing, prepare that time and start, instead of complaining, sit down and tell the Lord, and tell him, you know what, Lord, I actually have no food. I don't have food. Can you imagine? Or maybe, Lord, my rent is due and I don't have the money to pay the rent. Talk to the Lord about your problem. We've seen here Hannah in 1 Samuel talking to the Lord about her problem, and she was relieved. Honestly, for me, every time I talk to the Lord about my issues, I leave them at the feet of Jesus. He said, come unto me, all you who are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And when I finish talking to the Lord, I am so relieved. I know that he has my back. He said he has good plans for me, plans for good, not for evil, to give me hope and unexpected end. And I go about my day. And if I still feel like I need to go back and talk to him about it, I go back and tell him again and again until I feel like, okay, I've now talked and I'm good now. Okay? Everyone gets problems, remember, but the way we react to them is the difference, is what makes the difference, okay? If you found this video interesting, I'm going to make a playlist of other inspiring and motivating videos I've done before. I'll see you in the next video. Be blessed. First of all, but before I go, let me know in the comments, how do you handle problems? When you get problems, how do you handle them? Okay? See you in the next video. Be blessed. How do you handle challenges? Everyone faces challenges, and the only difference is how we manage those challenges. When you're faced with